Hello, my name is Tigran, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about narcissism. I've been witnessing more and more people talking about this concept on social media or YouTube channels, and there is a couple of things that worries me as a mental health professional. Most often there is no distinction between narcissism and NPD or narcissistic personality disorder, which appeared in the 80s with the DSM-3, if I'm not wrong. When we engage in the journey of becoming therapists, we learn that one of the most important things is to be able to have compassion and not be judgmental towards the people that we are working with. We are working on the field of mental health. We are not priests. We are not judges. However, this compassion and this non-judgmental position seem to have like a clear cut when it's about narcissism. People who are labeled as narcissists apparently are beyond any clinical or theoretical understanding. They are just bad, manipulative, egotistic monsters. So the material that I see frequently is about how to stay away from a narcissist, how to protect yourself from a narcissist, how to prevent getting tricked by a narcissist, and things on those lines. Let's start with a short explanation of where the concept of narcissism is coming from. So, as it's the case with other very important concepts in psychoanalysis, it comes from the Greek mythology. The myth of Narcissus, it tells us about a man who was not able to love anyone, and after breaking the heart of a nymph called Echo, who fell in love with Narcissus, but this love wasn't reciprocated, so she gets really sad, and there are different versions. She kills herself or she dies. So after this happens, the goddess of revenge, Nemesis, punishes Narcissus. So Narcissus falls in love with his own image reflected on the water, and he's not able to move from there, from staring at his own image, fearing that this image will disappear. There are different versions about the myth, but the most popular is that he gets incredibly sad because he understands that this image will never be able to reciprocate his love, and he dies or kills himself looking at his reflection, where then grows the flower with the same name. So there are a couple of key components about this myth that is related to our topic today. First, the person exists at the same time as an object and as a subject. Narcissus didn't fall in love with himself. He fell in love with his image, which is an object of love. And when this love was not reciprocated, he cannot tolerate it and he dies or kills himself. Which also gives us the idea of how important it is to be loved for the development or for having a sense of self. So let's talk about how nowadays, according to the DSM, one should understand NPD or narcissistic personality disorder. So there's also a distinction between a grandiose type and a vulnerable type. So the grandiose type is characterized by a grandiose sense of self or self-importance, fantasy of power, wealth, and success, the belief that they're special and unique, exploiting others for their own benefit, sense of entitlement, need for excessive admiration, envy to others, or the feeling that others are envying them, lack of empathy, arrogance, many other things that basically depict a person that is very close to a psychopathic kind of personality. But then we read the vulnerable type of NPD, and it talks about a person that could easily understood as depressed or socially withdrawn, mood lability, sense of inadequacy, rejection, sensitivity, low levels of self-esteem, high levels of shame. Okay, so now we have two types of NPD. The vulnerable type, which is more related to low self-esteem, depression, all these other things, but also the grandiose type, which is more related to arrogance, a sense of grandiosity, manipulation of others, exploitation of others, all these things that are described as conscious behaviors that these monsters do, right? NPD is also very closely related to a borderline structure or organization because of the affective instability, identity disturbances, unstable relationships, or anger that comes and goes in waves. The important thing is to stay away from the moral judgment and think that, oh, they're on purpose, premeditatedly, they are manipulating me, or they're putting themselves in the center of the attention. And understand this as a defense mechanism. The reason why a grandiose type of behaviors or attitudes exist is because they are a defense against a fear of fragmentation of the self. Narcissists have a very fragile sense of self. And so it could also be thought as the grandiose type of NPD being a defense against the vulnerable type of NPD. So let's go back very quickly to the myth of Narcissus, because nowadays when we talk about a narcissist, we talk about a person who loves himself more than anything. But the myth talks about something quite different. Narcissus doesn't fall in love with himself. He falls in love with an image reflected on the water. So the image is an external object, an idealized image. And this love is not reciprocated to the subject, and then the subject, the identity, the self of the subject is disintegrated, is fragmented. Okay, so to finalize, let's think about, first of all, that the self, the sense of self, is directly related to the reciprocation of the love that we should be receiving from the other. And when this doesn't happen, how fragile is the self and how big is the fear of fragmentation. And now we can understand why a narcissistic personality disorder is or a narcissist has to engage in all these kind of behaviors to protect the self because of how fragile they are. So as a last comment, I want to mention that part of this animosity against narcissistic personality disorder that I observe, I think comes from a frustration of the therapists, because engaging in therapy with a narcissistic person, it's extremely difficult. They're very challenging, and you cannot position yourself in a place of knowledge because that is directly a big threat to their identity. So there's other ways or other positions that the therapist should occupy in that relationship. So I hope this was interesting for you as a therapist or just a person who was interested in this topic. And I hope you can give me any feedback or questions. Thank you very much.